China launches 34 hypersonic missiles at U.S. carrier group in 8-minute salvo. Aegis defense system intercepts 7, misses 27, $13 billion carrier sinks in 14 minutes. This isn't a prediction. This is the war game result that terrified Pentagon planners in March 2024. The simulation ran 17 times with different variables. America lost the carrier in 14 of them. Not because the crew failed, not because equipment malfunctioned, but because hypersonic weapons broke the fundamental equation that's kept aircraft carriers safe for 80 years. The equation is simple. Detect the threat, track the threat, intercept the threat. Hypersonic missiles move at Mach 10. That's 7,772 miles per hour. At that speed, physics defeats technology. Radar sees the missile. Computers calculate intercept. But the missile arrives before interceptors launch. Game over. China tested their DF-27 hypersonic glide vehicle on August 15, 2024. The missile flew 1,240 miles in 9 minutes. It maneuvered during flight, changing altitude and direction to evade tracking. It hit a target ship with pinpoint accuracy. The test was the 14th successful Chinese hypersonic launch in 18 months. Russia has similar weapons. So does North Korea. America is racing to catch up, but the technology gap is real, the threat is immediate, and the implications reshape everything about naval warfare, nuclear deterrence, and great power conflict. Let me show you exactly how hypersonic weapons change the rules and why America's $4 trillion military investment might not matter on the first night of war. Hypersonic missiles are weapons that fly faster than Mach 5. That's 5 times the speed of sound, 3,836 miles per hour minimum. China's most advanced systems reach Mach 10 or higher. They come in 2 types: hypersonic glide vehicles and hypersonic cruise missiles. Glide vehicles launch on ballistic missiles, separate at altitude, then glide unpowered toward targets while maneuvering. Cruise missiles use scramjet engines to sustain hypersonic speed throughout flight. Both types share one characteristic: they're nearly impossible to intercept with current defense systems. That's not hyperbole, that's physics. The interception problem is brutal. America's SM-3 interceptor missile reaches Mach 10 and can hit ballistic missiles traveling predictable arcs. But hypersonic glide vehicles don't follow predictable arcs. They maneuver, they zigzag, they change altitude. A defender must predict where the target will be 30 seconds in the future, launch an interceptor to that point, and hope the prediction was accurate. If the target maneuvers after the interceptor launches, the intercept fails. The math is unforgiving. At Mach 10, a hypersonic weapon covers 2.1 miles per second. A defensive miscalculation of 3 seconds means 6.3 miles of error. The interceptor misses. The warhead hits. What's your assessment of hypersonic threats? Type A if you think current defenses can adapt. Type B if you believe offense has permanently defeated defense. China's DF-27 hypersonic glide vehicle represents the cutting edge of this technology. The missile launches from a mobile platform, making preemptive strikes nearly impossible. Range: estimated 5,000 miles, covering all of the Western Pacific, including Guam and Hawaii. The glide vehicle separates from the booster at 62 miles altitude. It then begins a complex flight profile, descending and maneuvering while maintaining hypersonic speed. Terminal velocity during the final attack phase exceeds Mach 12. That's 9,206 miles per hour. The warhead carries 200 pounds of high explosive, enough to penetrate a carrier's armored deck and detonate inside the hull. 1 hit mission kills a carrier. 3 hits sink it. The August test demonstrated capabilities that Pentagon analysts found deeply concerning. The DF-27 executed 7 distinct maneuvers during its 9-minute flight. It altered course by 34 degrees. It descended from 82,000 feet to 65,000 feet, then climbed back to 78,000 feet. Each maneuver was designed to defeat intercept calculations. Radar operators watching the test described it as trying to shoot a hummingbird flying through a hurricane. The target was always moving, never where you expected, impossible to lead with any confidence. The final approach came at a 47-degree angle, striking the target ship amidships. The impact punched through the deck armor and detonated internally. The ship began listing within 3 minutes. It would have sunk in 14 minutes if it hadn't been a decommissioned hulk already destined for scrapping. China didn't develop this technology alone or quickly. They began serious hypersonic research in 2006. 18 years of investment, hundreds of billions in funding, thousands of engineers and scientists. They studied American missile defense capabilities meticulously. They identified vulnerabilities. They designed weapons specifically to exploit those vulnerabilities. The DF-27 is the result, but it's not the only system. China has the DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle operational since 2020. They have the DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile modified for hypersonic capability. They're developing air-launched hypersonic missiles for their H-6 bombers. The arsenal is growing, the technology is maturing, and America's defenses are standing still. The U.S. Navy's Aegis combat system is the world's most advanced ship-based air defense network. It combines SPY-6 radar with SM-6 interceptor missiles and sophisticated fire control algorithms. Aegis can engage dozens of targets simultaneously. It's defeated every threat it's faced for 40 years. But Aegis was designed for different problems: subsonic cruise missiles, supersonic anti-ship missiles, ballistic missiles following predictable trajectories. Hypersonic maneuvering threats break the system's core assumptions. The SPY-6 radar can track hypersonic weapons. But tracking isn't killing. The SM-6 interceptor has theoretical capability against hypersonic targets in laboratory conditions. In operational conditions with real-world chaos and imperfect data, the kill probability drops below 30%. That's not defense. That's hoping. If this analysis of how technology is reshaping naval warfare is opening your eyes, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The March 2024 war game that simulated hypersonic attacks on carrier groups revealed the brutal math. The scenario placed USS Ronald Reagan carrier strike group 400 miles east of Taiwan during a conflict. China launched 34 DF-27 missiles in an 8-minute salvo. Saturation attack doctrine. Overwhelm defenses with volume. The carrier strike group included 1 carrier, 2 Ticonderoga-class cruisers, and 4 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers. Combined, they had 424 vertical launch cells loaded with SM-6 and SM-3 interceptors. They had 5 Aegis combat systems working in network mode. They had E-2D Hawkeye aircraft providing early warning. Maximum defensive capability. It wasn't enough. The simulation tracked every engagement. The Aegis network detected the missile launches 43 seconds after liftoff. At that point, the missiles were 380 miles away. Time to impact: 4 minutes, 12 seconds. The system immediately designated targets and began launching interceptors. The first SM-6 left its cell 8 seconds after detection. Interceptors continued launching for the next 90 seconds. 47 SM-6 missiles went up. Each interceptor costs $4.3 million. That's $202 million in defensive expenditure in 90 seconds. The interceptors climbed to altitude and activated their seekers. They found targets. They maneuvered for intercept. 32 interceptors completely missed because the hypersonic weapons maneuvered after the SM-6 committed to its intercept trajectory. 8 interceptors achieved near misses, passing within lethal radius, but failing to detonate proximity fuses due to closure rate issues. 7 interceptors achieved kills. 7 out of 47. 15% success rate. 27 hypersonic weapons continued inbound. The Aegis network attempted second-wave intercepts. Another 38 SM-6 launched. Time was compressing. The hypersonic weapons were now 140 miles out. Time to impact, 1 minute 6 seconds. The mathematics became impossible. Interceptors needed 40 seconds to reach engagement altitude. That left 26 seconds for terminal intercept. Not enough time for the guidance systems to refine solutions. The second wave destroyed 6 additional threats, but 21 weapons kept coming. The carrier strike group entered close-in weapon system range. Phalanx guns fired 3,000 rounds of 20 mm ammunition. CRAM missiles launched. These are last-ditch defenses. They killed 4 hypersonic weapons. 17 hit. The first warhead struck USS Ronald Reagan on the port side bow at 9:47 a.m. simulation time. The 200-pound warhead penetrated 14 feet into the ship before detonating. The explosion ruptured the hull, flooded 6 compartments, and killed 89 personnel. 8 seconds later, 3 more warheads hit in rapid succession. One struck the flight deck above the hangar bay, detonating among parked aircraft. Secondary explosions from jet fuel and munitions ripped through 4 decks. Another hit the island superstructure, destroying the command center and killing the entire command staff. The third penetrated the starboard side near the engine room. Flooding began immediately. By 9:49 a.m., the carrier was listing 12 degrees and dead in the water. 13 additional warheads struck over the next 6 minutes, distributed across the destroyer escorts and cruisers. 2 destroyers sank outright. 1 cruiser was mission killed. The carrier was taking water faster than pumps could evacuate it. At 10:01 a.m., abandoned ship orders were given. USS Ronald Reagan sank at 10:14 a.m. Total time from first detection to ship loss: 14 minutes, 37 seconds. What would you do as fleet commander if you knew hypersonic strikes were inbound? Try to intercept? Scatter the formation? Comment your tactical approach. The simulation ran 17 times with variable factors. Different launch timing, different defensive loadouts, different intercept algorithms. America won 3 times. In those scenarios, the carrier survived but sustained heavy damage and lost 35 to 40% combat capability. In one scenario, defensive systems achieved 41% intercept rate due to favorable geometry and exceptional luck. In 14 scenarios, the carrier sank or was mission killed beyond recovery. The average time from first detection to catastrophic damage was 16 minutes. The implications were clear. Aircraft carriers cannot survive sustained hypersonic attack from peer adversaries. The platform that's dominated naval warfare since 1942 is obsolete in high-threat environments. The cost analysis was devastating. China expended 34 DF-27 missiles in the simulation. Estimated cost per missile, $18 million. Total expenditure, $612 million. America lost one $13 billion aircraft carrier, 2 $1.8 billion destroyers, suffered catastrophic damage to one $1.6 billion cruiser, and expended $363 million in defensive missiles. Total American loss, $18.2 billion. China spent $612 million to destroy $18.2 billion in assets. Return on investment, 30 to 1. That's economically catastrophic warfare. If China can achieve similar exchange ratios across multiple engagements, America cannot afford to fight. The industrial base cannot replace carriers faster than hypersonics can sink them. The budget cannot sustain 30 to 1 loss ratios. Economics defeats military capability when the cost imbalance becomes that severe. Russia possesses similar capabilities with their Kinzhal and Zircon hypersonic missiles. The Kinzhal is an air-launched ballistic missile modified for hypersonic flight. It's been used in Ukraine, though not against naval targets. Range: 1,200 miles. Speed: Mach 10. The Zircon is a ship-launched hypersonic cruise missile. Range: 625 miles. Speed: Mach 9. Russia deployed Zircon on frigates in 2023. These weapons give Russian naval forces the ability to engage NATO ships at ranges where NATO cannot effectively respond. The Black Sea and Baltic Sea are now no-go zones for American carriers if Russia decides to escalate. The Mediterranean becomes contested space. American naval dominance, which has underwritten global stability for 80 years, is now regional rather than global. The development of counter-hypersonic technologies is urgent but slow. The U.S. Missile Defense Agency is testing improved interceptors. Lockheed Martin is developing the hypersonic conventional strike weapon. Northrop Grumman is working on scramjet technology. DARPA has multiple programs researching hypersonic defense, but research takes time. Testing takes time. Production takes time. America is 5 to 7 years behind China in fielding operational systems. Those years matter. China will deploy 200 AW-300 additional hypersonic launchers in that time frame. Every launcher is a threat multiplier. Every missile is a carrier killer. The technology gap is widening, not closing. Support this kind of in-depth research into emerging military technology by giving this video a thumbs up if you're finding value in the analysis. The strategic implications cascade across every aspect of military planning. First, carrier strike groups cannot operate in contested waters without accepting catastrophic risk. The Western Pacific is now denied space during high-threat scenarios. Second, American forward bases in Japan, South Korea, and Guam are vulnerable to hypersonic strikes that current defenses cannot stop. Runways can be cratered, fuel depots destroyed, command centers eliminated, all in the first 20 minutes of conflict. Third, nuclear escalation risks increase because hypersonic missiles can carry conventional or nuclear warheads. Defenders cannot distinguish until impact. A massive hypersonic strike might be interpreted as nuclear attack, triggering retaliatory launch. The decision timeline compresses from 30 minutes to 4 minutes. Human judgment has no time to prevent catastrophic miscalculation. China understands these implications perfectly. Their military doctrine now emphasizes first-strike hypersonic attacks to cripple American power projection before a conflict begins. The goal is not necessarily to sink every carrier. The goal is to make American commanders believe every carrier is vulnerable, forcing them to operate cautiously or not at all. Deterrence through capability. If America won't risk carriers in combat, then carriers lose their strategic value. China achieves sea control without firing a shot. The threat alone reshapes behavior. That's strategic brilliance. America's response options are limited. Increasing interceptor stockpiles helps marginally, but doesn't solve the fundamental problem. You can't shoot down what you can't reliably track and predict. Developing offensive hypersonic weapons creates parity, but doesn't address defensive vulnerability. If both sides have carrier-killing hypersonics, both sides lose carriers in any conflict. Distributed fleet architecture reduces vulnerability by spreading assets across more platforms. Instead of concentrating power in supercarriers, distribute it across smaller vessels. But that requires rebuilding the Navy from scratch. That takes decades and trillions of dollars. None of these solutions deliver rapid results. The most realistic near-term solution is strategic adjustment. Accept that carriers cannot operate in hypersonic threat environments. Redesign operational plans accordingly. Use carriers for power projection in permissive environments. In contested environments, rely on submarines, long-range bombers, and distributed surface combatants. This represents philosophical shift from sea control to sea denial. America won't dominate oceans anymore. Instead, America prevents adversaries from dominating oceans. It's a defensive posture, not offensive. It's psychologically difficult for a military that's operated offensively for 80 years. But reality demands adaptation. Hypersonic weapons made the old playbook obsolete. The first night of war between China and America would be unlike any conflict in history. China launches 400 hypersonic missiles at U.S. bases and naval forces in the Western Pacific. Kadena Air Base in Okinawa takes 47 hits in 12 minutes. Runways are cratered, hangars collapse, fuel facilities burn. Andersen Air Force Base in Guam suffers similar devastation. Naval vessels at Yokosuka and Sasebo are targeted. Carriers attempting to operate 600 miles from China face saturation attacks they cannot defeat. Within 2 hours, American forward military infrastructure is crippled. Aircraft can't launch, ships can't sortie. Command and control is disrupted. China achieves tactical surprise through technological advantage. The war doesn't start with gradual escalation. It starts with overwhelming first strike that paralyzes American response. That's the nightmare scenario Pentagon planners lose sleep over. Was China's hypersonic development a game-changing strategic achievement, or an overrated capability that won't perform as advertised in real combat? Leave your analysis below. The technology cannot be uninvented. Hypersonic weapons exist. They work. Multiple nations possess them. Proliferation is inevitable. Iran will acquire them through Russia or China. North Korea is already testing early variants. Non-state actors might eventually access simplified versions. The world is entering an era where first strike advantage has returned. Whoever shoots first wins. That's destabilizing. It incentivizes preemption. It makes crises more dangerous. Historical parallels are concerning. Dreadnought battleships in 1906 made all previous warships obsolete overnight. Nuclear weapons in 1945 rendered conventional great power war potentially suicidal. Hypersonic missiles in 2024 are making power projection platforms like carriers obsolete. Each technological leap compressed decision timelines and raised stakes. Each leap made war more destructive and peace more fragile. The philosophical lesson is harsh. Technology advantages are temporary. America dominated through carriers. China developed weapons that kill carriers. America will develop defenses. China will develop counter-defenses. The cycle continues. But during transition periods, when one side leaps ahead, the strategic balance becomes dangerously unstable. We're in that transition now. China has advantage. America is catching up. The next 5 years are critical. If tensions escalate during this window, the results could be catastrophic. If both sides exercise restraint until parity is restored, crisis might be avoided. That requires wisdom from leaders on both sides. Wisdom is not guaranteed. American strength has always rested on technological superiority, industrial capacity, and strategic geography. Hypersonic weapons challenge all three. They negate technological superiority in naval combat. They require industrial capacity. America hasn't demonstrated recently. They eliminate strategic geography by making distance irrelevant when weapons travel at Mach 10. America must rebuild advantages from first principles. That means investing in next-generation technologies, directed energy weapons, artificial intelligence for defense coordination, space-based sensors for early warning, quantum computing for engagement calculations. The next technological leap must be defensive, not offensive. America needs to make hypersonics interceptable, not build more hypersonics. Defense wins long-term. Offense wins battles. Defense wins wars. Freedom requires the ability to deter aggression. Deterrence requires credible capability to deny adversaries their objectives. If American carriers can't survive, deterrence weakens. If forward bases can't operate, deterrence collapses. China is testing whether America can adapt faster than they can exploit advantage. The answer will determine whether the Indo-Pacific remains stable or descends into conflict. The stakes are existential. Not for America's survival as a nation, but for America's role as security guarantor. Allies will seek accommodation with China if they doubt American protection. That's already happening. Hypersonic weapons accelerated the process. So here's what needs answering. Can America close the hypersonic gap before a crisis forces conflict? Should the U.S. pursue diplomatic agreements limiting hypersonic deployments, or would China ignore them? How do you defend against weapons that arrive before you can react? Think deeply and share your perspective in the comments. If this deep dive into the most dangerous military technology reshaping great power competition made you think differently about modern warfare, subscribe to stay informed. Share this with someone who needs to understand why the next war won't look like any previous war. Hit like if you value detailed tactical and strategic analysis over headlines. The hypersonic era is here. Carriers are vulnerable. Bases are vulnerable. The American way of war is vulnerable. Adaptation is not optional. The question is whether adaptation happens before or after catastrophic loss proves the point. Your engagement tells us you care about these questions. Subscribe, comment, and let's keep examining the hard truths about how power and technology are colliding in the 21st century.